My name is Alan Drake, and the website is spiritofwisdommedia.com. My grandmother passed away in 2001, just a few days after the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. She was 97 years old. I was really close to my grandmother. As we were growing up, my brother and I often stayed with her while my parents worked. She lived through 2 world wars and raised 4 children in rural Texas during the Great Depression. My grandmother was a hard worker all of her life. She left her last job at age 85, believe it or not, but only because the clothing store where she worked finally went out of business. My grandmother had a friendly smile for everyone, even when she was just getting a picture taken for her bus pass. That's how I remember her, almost always in a good mood, with a friendly smile for everyone. She didn't have an easy life, but she had no use for self-pity. She stayed busy, and she was always willing to help anyone in need. As an adult, I used to visit her in the same house where she had kept us while we were growing up. She would sit in her recliner, and I would sit on her couch, and we would talk for hours. Her couch now sits under my mantle in my home. On the mantle is an old clock that used to sit on my grandmother's bookshelf. My grandmother prided herself on keeping everything neat, tidy, dust-free, and in its place. The mantle clock was clean, shiny, and in perfect working order when I brought it home from my grandmother's house. I've tried to keep it that way, but in September of 2014, the clock finally stopped working. It ticked its last tock. That clock obviously has sentimental value for me. Seeing it stop working distresses me because of that, but I also believe that sometimes things happen for a reason. I wonder if there might be a deeper meaning to that clock stopping at this particular time. I wonder if God might be sending a message to let us know that we're in a new season now, and that the times that my grandmother knew are over. During the Apostle John's experience in the book of Revelation, he saw a mighty angel coming down out of heaven with his face like the sun and legs like columns of fire. The angel set one foot on the sea and his other foot on the land. His shout was like the roaring of a lion. At one point, the angel raised his right hand to heaven and made this declaration: "Time has run out." That's in Revelation 10, verse 6. We may have come to one of those junctures in time. It may be that the time for us has run out. Life as we may have known it may be a thing of the past. What has been prophesied by so many for years may finally be here. For several years, established prophetic voices have been telling us that rough times are coming. John Paul Jackson and Bob Jones both described these times as a perfect storm of calamities involving economic, political, and religious events, along with wars and catastrophic events in the weather and in nature. On September 14th, 2014, I had a dream in which I saw a record label on an old 45 single that read "Little Susie." I had a sense that this was a theme song. I turned to look at a member of my church who was there with me in the dream, and she was crying, or had been crying, and had tears rolling down her cheeks. I don't know her very well in real life, but in the dream I asked her, "I wonder why this is a theme song." Then I immediately turned back to look at the record label again, and now I could see the full title. It was "Wake Up Little Susie" by the Everly Brothers. As soon as I saw the full title of the song, I heard the Everly Brothers singing it. My sense was that this was not just a theme song for the dream, but for all of us, and the time in which we are all living. We must all wake up. We are living in a very different time that may become much more intense soon in many areas. We may need to prepare and adjust to new circumstances that change without much warning. You may not know the name Neville Johnson. He was a respected leader in the churches in Australia. Paul Keith Davis named Neville Johnson as one of only 3 people who understood the spiritual realm better than anyone he knew. On August 6, 2014, in Lancaster, California, Neville Johnson made a bold announcement. He declared that Yom Kippur that year would mark the cutoff point for us, especially for those of us in America. That date would mark the close of one period in time and the entering in of something very different. Yom Kippur that year began on Friday evening, October 3rd. You can watch Neville Johnson deliver that message on YouTube. Just look up the Lancaster Prophetic Conference 2014, Session 1. So why is this happening? The short answer to the question of why is that we, as a society, have forgotten God. We have turned away from Him, forsaken His ways, and walked away from the protection that came with obedience to His commands. As a result, we have left ourselves vulnerable to forces that could be very destructive. Before the children of Israel entered their promised land, Moses took great pains to caution them over and over not to forget the God that had brought them there. His words are recorded in the book of Deuteronomy, where he says, "Only give heed to yourself and keep your soul diligently, so that you do not forget the things which your eyes have seen, and they do not depart from your heart all the days of your life, but make them known to your sons and your grandsons." That's Deuteronomy 4, verse 9. Also, he says in Deuteronomy 4:23, "So watch yourselves that you do not forget the covenant of the Lord your God which he made with you." And in Deuteronomy 6:12, "Then watch yourself that you do not forget the Lord who brought you from the land of Egypt and out of the house of slavery." And Deuteronomy 8:11, "Beware that you do not forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments and his ordinances and his statutes, which I am commanding you today." Over and over and over, Moses cautioned Israel not to forget God. But at times, Israel did forget the God who had created and blessed them. When this happened, Israel went through some difficult times until they cried out to God as a nation and returned to him again. Almost the entire book of Judges is the story of Israel going through the same cycle. First of all, forgetting God, then secondly, experiencing times of great difficulty, then seeking God again, crying out to God for deliverance, and finally, experiencing times of peace and prosperity after turning back to God. And then forgetting God again and repeating the cycle over and over and over for generations. It seems that we are now in one of those difficult times. It's a time that many established, respected leaders in the church have been prophesying for decades. The time is now upon us. So, what should we do? What is the best way to face this time, which may bring many difficulties? Some of the most popular images of our day are the ones that show the British royal crown at the top with the slogan, "Keep calm and carry on," or variations on that theme. You know, that's a good start. Keep calm. The Bible exhorts us many, many times to fear not. Fear only opens the door to more problems. Since God, who loved us enough to send his Son to die for us, tells us not to be afraid, it must mean that there are better ways to respond to our circumstances. Fear does nothing to help the situation, and if it leads to extreme panic, it can actually prevent us from finding meaningful solutions to difficult situations. So, fear is not an option. Fear will do us no good and could do a lot of harm by keeping us from finding solutions to problems. And it could actually open the door to other problems. We must realize that God has known that this was coming for a long time. It is no surprise to him. He knows what is coming, and he knows the best ways for us to prepare and to respond to these situations. So, our first priority must be to draw close to him. He's got the answers we need. If we draw near to him, he promises to draw near to us. That's in James 4, verse 8. Ultimately, safety and provision can only be found in Him. The Bible warns in Isaiah 31, verse 1, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt for help and rely on horses and trust in chariots because they are many, and in horsemen because they are very strong, but they do not look to the Holy One of Israel, nor seek the Lord." We are told in Psalm 20, verse 7, "Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we will remember the name of the Lord our God." Proverbs 18:10 assures us that the name of the Lord is a strong fortress. The godly run to Him and are safe. There is a passage of Scripture in Luke 21, verses 34 through 36, that could well be applied to our situation today. In this passage, Jesus says, "Be careful, or your hearts will be weighed down with carousing, drunkenness, and the anxieties of life, and that day will close on you suddenly like a trap. For it will come on all those who live on the face of the whole earth. Be always on the watch, and pray that you may be able to escape all that is about to happen, and that you may be able to stand before the Son of Man." Jesus admonished His disciples to be always on the watch. But what should we be watching for? What should we be on the lookout for? At the same time that Jesus spoke these words to His disciples, He also described certain signs that would indicate that the time was upon them. In our time, there have been many messages from established, respected prophets that have described signs that we should be watching for and be prepared to respond to. Some of these prophets have given detailed descriptions of signs and appropriate responses. The signs that they have described have included economic events, political events, religious movements, wars, and events in the nature and in the weather. This is the time of calamities that Bob Jones and John Paul Jackson called the perfect storm, because so many of these events may be happening at the same time and have the effect of making all of it seem more intense. By watching and praying, we can be prepared for what is coming and hear God's voice to tell us how to respond in the moment. We are exhorted in 2 Chronicles 20, verse 20, to believe in the Lord your God, and you shall be established. Believe His prophets, and you shall prosper. Some of the prophetic voices that have spoken to warn us and to help us prepare are Bob Jones and John Paul Jackson, who I've already mentioned, and also Rick Joyner of Morning Star Ministries, Bobby Connor, and Terry Bennett. Neville Johnson has written and spoken extensively in efforts to prepare the church for what we will be facing. I encourage you to check out the messages of these prophetic ministers. As different signs or warnings come to my attention, I will plan to share them in future newsletters and articles as God leads, so that we may help each other to be prepared. But our goal during these difficult times is not just to prepare for our own survival. That's just the very lowest level of goals. We watch, pray, and prepare in order to be best able to reach out to help others when the needs arise in their lives. Together, we will not only survive, we will overcome. As Jesus said in John 16:33, "These things I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." My name is Alan Drake, and the website is spiritofwisdommedia.com.